Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. My name is David Neufeld, and I am proud to serve as your USJE National President. I want to begin by recognizing that while USJE is convening this town hall virtually, we are meeting on Indigenous land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, the territory where USJE's national office is located. Please note that simultaneous interpretation is available, and in order to access that service, click on the interpretation.
Cliquez sur le bouton.
I want to welcome you to tonight's town hall, and thank you for being here. You are taking precious time out of your busy schedule to learn more about the federal government's cuts to public services and how your union is advocating on your behalf. We also wish to better equip you and coworkers during these very trying times. At the end of the session, you will have the opportunity to provide your questions and comments during our question and answer session. I am joined this evening by my esteemed Director of Labor Relations, Melanie Crescenzi, as well as PSAC experts in workforce adjustment, Aaron Serret and Darren Piccioni. Thank you as well to my Director of Communications, Sébastien Bezot, who will be acting as our host for the question and answer session. The reality is that we are holding this town hall at a time of considerable stress and turmoil for so many of our members. As public safety personnel and USJE members, I know you work very hard, day in and day out, to keep Canadians safe. Over the years, I, alongside USJE's regional vice presidents, have had the privilege to meet so many of you from coast to coast to coast. Le SCC reconnaît votre dévouement, votre engagement et l'expertise qui vous apportez aux 17 ministères et organismes au sein desquels vous travaillez en tant que membre du SCC. Nous savons que grande partie de votre travail s'effectue dans l'ombre de la première ligne, mais qu'il est absolument essentiel à l'infrastructure de la sécurité publique du Canada. Bon nombre de membres de SCC constituent l'épine dorsale opérationnelle de cette infrastructure. Sans vous, les ministères et organismes pour lesquels vous travaillez ne pourraient pas fonctionner, ni avancer. Through representation at countless national and regional labor management meetings, USJE has advocated for better working conditions, reduced workloads, improved access to psychological supports, the retention of the RCMP in municipalities, provinces, and territories where it is currently under attack, and so many other issues. USJE has also had a very strong track record of engaging elected officials at all levels of government. On April 15th, we celebrated 7 outstanding USJE members for their contributions to public safety. Congratulations to Mike Ashman, Chantal Billier, Francine Cadieux, Hadam Mohamed Hamid, Christy McDougall, Michelle Martin, and Nicholas Tilnier. Nous avons organisé de nombreux événements sur la colline parlementaire au cours des dernières années afin de souligner l'importance des contributions essentielles du personnel fédéral de la sécurité publique. On a aussi souligné la nécessité de soutenir les membres du SCC dans ce travail. Tout récemment, le ministère fédéral de la sécurité publique, Gary Anandasandagri, s'est joint à nous pour les prix annuels nationaux de la sécurité publique du SCC, célébrant 7 membres exceptionnels du SCC pour leur contribution à la sécurité publique. Over the past few months, USJE's budget cuts campaign has become a top priority for our union. This campaign is focused on supporting our members impacted by the cuts forced by the Comprehensive Expenditure Review process and workforce adjustment. When the national executive voted to adopt this campaign, we had the following campaign objectives in mind. One, create a campaign that fights to protect members' jobs, workplace conditions, and public safety. Two, ensure that the campaign includes sustained political action and puts pressure on the government to, where possible, reconsider or reverse decisions taken that have an impact on public safety and our membership. Three, implement a campaign that promotes member mobilization across the country and encourages members to stand up against the cuts. And fourthly, provide support and education to our frontline members who are impacted by the cuts and workforce adjustment. I'm very proud to report that we are delivering on those 4 campaign goals. I invite you to visit our campaign website, safetyinjeopardy.ca. Pour accéder à notre site web de campagne, je vous invite à visiter sécuritéendanger.ca. If you receive our monthly newsletter and follow us on social media, you would have noticed that we recently organized a national mobilization event on March the 26th. The next event is scheduled for May 28th. I would encourage you to contact your USJE Regional Vice President to get involved. To support our goal of education, USJE has published 2 bilingual podcasts dedicated to the subject of workforce adjustment. In addition, at USJE's 5 regional conferences in the fall of 2025, participants received WFA training so that they could understand how WFA works and how members can be supported through the WFA process. This training was delivered by the 2 WFA subject matter experts from the PSAC who are here with us this evening, Aaron Surette and Darren Paccioni. De plus, depuis janvier 2026, le SESJ participe activement à des discussions avec 7 des 17 ministères fédéraux qu'elle représente, lesquels ont décidé de mettre en œuvre des mesures pour réaménager les effectifs afin d'atteindre leurs objectifs de réduction des dépenses opérationnelles dans le cadre de l'examen complet des dépenses. Les discussions ont varié d'un ministère à l'autre, mais il est clair que l'information transmise a été extrêmement lente et à nous parvenir et qu'il y manquait beaucoup de détails. At this stage, USJE is pressing for greater transparency around the cuts. Specifically, USJE has been requesting that departments provide the true cost of these reductions. This includes the number of vacant positions being used to account for a portion of the operational savings, and the number of positions being outright eliminated through the WFA process. USJE has also been questioning each department on how they intend to introduce or utilize artificial intelligence in the workplace and in the future, as this is something that has been woven throughout the federal government budget in November 2025 as a means to gain efficiencies. From our view, it has been quite concerning to see how poorly equipped some of the departments have been in navigating the WFA process. Some senior departmental leaders have been scrambling to understand and implement the provisions under our WFA in our collective agreements. This includes identifying what a work unit may look like and how decisions are taken on sending out affected notices to members. Je tiens à souligner que la directrice chevronnée de relations de travail de SESJ, Melanie Crescenzi, a participé à tous les comités pour réaménager les effectifs qui touchent les membres de SESJ. Je souhaite le remercier d'avoir entrepris ce travail très important. I will now turn it over to Melanie to go over in depth about the information that has been provided to USJE to date. Melanie?
Bonsoir tout le monde. Pas sûr si ça fonctionne.
Ça fonctionne, Mélanie. You're
OK.
good to go.
Excellent, merci. Bonsoir tout le monde. Comme David a dit, je suis la directrice des relations de travail. Aujourd'hui, comme vous avez entendu avec David, il a évoqué l'approche globale que le SCG a adoptée dans le cadre de notre campagne contre les coupes budgétaires. Mon objectif pour vous aujourd'hui, c'est de vous fournir des informations plus spécifiques à chaque ministère concernant la situation actuelle, concernant les mesures de réaménagement des effectifs. Bien que nous nous efforcions d'être aussi précis que possible, il faut comprendre que nous ne pouvons pas aborder ici les données spécifiques à chaque groupe ou catégorie. Donc, mon objectif, c'est de vous donner un aperçu général de la situation par ministère. Et bien que je sois conscient qu'il s'agit aujourd'hui d'une réunion spécifique à la situation du service correctionnel, afin de vous permettre de comprendre les répercussions réelles du réaménagement des effectifs sur l'ensemble de nos membres, je vais vous présenter les chiffres et la situation réelle pour tous les ministères qui sont concernés. Les réaménagements des effectifs, ce n'est pas un nouveau concept. Dans le fond, il y a eu beaucoup de mesures de réaménagement des effectifs qui a eu lieu au cours des dernières années, mais elles étaient peu fréquentes et concernaient souvent seulement un ou deux membres. Elles résultaient généralement d'une restructuration et, dans de nombreux cas, n'entraînaient aucune perte d'emploi. Par contre, la mesure de réaménagement des effectifs à laquelle nous assistons actuellement est manifestement très différente, évidemment, en ce sens qu'elle vise un nombre massif de personnes dans la fonction publique et touche presque tous les ministères relevant de l'administration publique centrale et au-delà. To give you a bit of background, USJE first started to see lead-ups to workforce adjustment exercises arise under the Refocusing Government Spending Initiative back in 2024, early 2025. At that time, many departments began implementing the stop the clock measures to freeze the transition of term employees to indeterminate employees. And then we had many departments also implemented temporary staffing restrictions to control departmental workforce growth, and with the hopes to minimize impacts on indeterminate employees. A lot of those initiatives are still in place right now, even though we've started the WFA exercises in some of these departments. June 2025 is when USJE saw its first big WFA exercise, and that was with the Department of Justice. It affected at the time 61 of our members. Since then, each time a department implements a WFA exercise, a national joint WFA committee is struck between the department executives and bargaining agent representatives. So as David noted, I, along with either the national president or different regional vice presidents, have sat and continue to sit on those numerous WFA committees. To date, we have 7 committees struck. We have one that will be starting shortly. And we have another that may be in the works depending on what the department decides. So the purpose of these committees is for the departments to provide regular updates on their WFA exercises. And for bargaining agents, USJE is not the only one at the table. As we know, our departments have a number of bargaining agents. But that's the process or the venue by which we raise any national procedural concerns that we're hearing from our members. So the next little bit is going to be giving you some numbers by department of what we're seeing, where we're at with this exercise. We'll start with ATSSC, that's the Administrative Tribunal Support Service of Canada. They have had 2 waves of WFA exercises already. The first affected 18 of our members, and the second, they issued 25 notices affecting members. In wave 1 of the 18 that were affected, 8 members either resigned, deployed, or were appointed. 4 members were opting, and 6 notices were rescinded. So in terms of involuntary job loss, we didn't see that in wave 1. Wave 2 is ongoing. Of the 25 affected in wave 2, 6 members have had their affected status rescinded. 9 members are currently in the opting stage, and 10 files remain to be actioned by the employer. As I noted, we have national workforce adjustment committees with each of these departments. So for the ATSSC, we meet with the department on a monthly basis to get updates. Our next department was CAS, Court Administration Services. They had 6 of our members that were affected. The majority have been resolved. 4 of the 6 are resolved. 2 are pending, but follow-ups are being made, and the outlook appears to be positive. In terms of meetings, since all 6 appear to be underway, the meetings are done on an ad hoc basis if needed to discuss anything in particular. Correctional Services Canada, we all know, started their process in January of 2026. At the time, they advised that 611 total notices were sent. That's for all bargaining agents, including non-represented employees. And their global reduction target was of 282. So of the 611 affected, 386 of those are our members, so they're USJE members. And of the target of 282 reduction, we've been told that 182 of those positions are represented by USJE. In terms of a wave 2, we were told at the onset that there will likely be a wave 2. Originally, the thought was that it would be implemented by April 1st, 2026. But with the arrival of the new commissioner, what we've been told is that they've been paused that exercise in order to brief the new commissioner on what the plan is. We don't know yet whether they're going to stay the course or whether, due to the new commissioner's arrival and a different perspective, things will change. In terms of where they are in their current wave 1 process, so the voluntary departure program just closed across the department. So some WFA exercises will be canceled since the VDP and the early retirement incentive yielded the target reductions that they needed for certain work units. Members who applied for VDP should start getting responses this week. And the hope is that the department starts rescinding letters for those areas where WFA is no longer needed during the week of May 11th. In other units where reduction targets remain, CSC is preparing to launch a SURLO processes and or issue opting letters depending on what their plan is. The analysis is ongoing, but we're told that the SURLO processes should be launched or could be launched as early as the week of May 18th. In terms of meeting with CSC, given the number of reductions and given the number of bargaining agents at the table, we do have bi-weekly committee meetings. We also, given the size and the structure of CSC, they operate by different sector heads. We have regular ad hoc meetings with sector heads to discuss group-specific concerns. Our following department is the Department of Justice. As I noted, that was the first to start the WFA exercise with 61 affected members in June of 2025. They also triggered a wave 2 with 60 affected members. So in wave 1 of the 60 affected members, 15 were given guaranteed reasonable job offers. 15 were either deployed or appointed. 2 are currently in the opting period. 5 selected the voluntary departure program, and 24 affected statuses were rescinded. In wave 2 is in progress right now. We were told from the onset that any GRJOs were really considered in wave 1, so they do not expect any GRJOs in wave 2. In terms of meeting with Justice, we meet with them on a monthly basis for updates. Then we also have the Parole Board of Canada. They're in wave 1. We have no knowledge of there being any subsequent waves. Currently, they have 43 affected USJE members with a target reduction of 38. So 22 of the 43 affected are case and subject record clerk positions, so CR4s. The VDP period ended for those 22 positions on April 10th, 2026, with 4 employees choosing to participate in the VDP. And through the VDP process and some external staffing actions that the PBC undertook, the department was able to rescind the affected status of all of the positions, the remaining case and subject records clerk positions in all regions except the prairies. For the prairies, for that group, 2 SURLO processes are being initiated for the remaining 7 clerk positions. One's going to be in Edmonton, one's going to be in Saskatoon. And PBC is expected to retain 5 of those 7 candidates. So these processes should take, once they're implemented, approximately 2 weeks to complete. And then, so that was for 22 of the 43. The remaining 21 affected employees, 12 are in an opting period until July 15th, 2026. 3 of those 12 have submitted opting forms, and 1 has been appointed to another position within the department. 4 are currently on leave without pay with unknown return dates, and 4 have or are currently looking to deploy, which would then conclude the associated WFA process. PBC as well is a department that we meet with regularly on a monthly basis for updates. PPSC, Public Prosecution, just recently, as of April 16, 2026, instituted its first WFA exercise with 12 affected members. We've been told that barring any changes brought on by the government, the department does not envision any other WFA exercises. We've also been told that those 12 positions, there's a reduction target of 100%, so all 12 will be abolished. 6 of the 12 are currently going through the 30-day VDP process. The other 6 received opting letters and are currently in their 120-day opting period. So PPSC is one that we have requested a committee meeting, and we're waiting to schedule that. Our first one on an informal basis will be on Monday, May 11th. Public safety, one of our biggest hit departments thus far in terms of numbers. They have 672 total affected with a global reduction target of 375. Of those 672, 408 are PSAC members. There are different components under PSAC, but of the 408 PSAC members, approximately 389 of those are USJE members. And of their reduction target of 375, 220 positions represented by PSAC, the majority being USJE members. We're not aware of a wave 2 at this time. Their initial WFA exercise is going through the process. The department has completed voluntary departure program and opting periods are underway. They're also getting ready to launch SHRLO processes where applicable. As of the end of April 2026, of the 408 PSAC affected members, we are told that 101 files have been resolved, either through departure, deployment, reasonable job offer, etc. Public safety meets with the components in the union on a monthly basis. Finally, we have the RCMP. They were a little bit late to the game. They came in at end of February 2026. We're going to call it a wave 1. It's their first initiative. They sent out 265 notices of affected status that were sent out to all. So that's across different unions and as well as excluded employees. So of those 265, 57 of those affected were indeterminate USJE members, 3 of which are civilian members. The majority, the bulk majority really, are all located within the NCR region. And so there is no wave 2 at this time, but there have been indications that they expect that there may be a need for further reductions, but we haven't been given any information and we don't know whether it's our bargaining unit or some of the others. In terms of status update, of the 265 notices, in total, 4 statuses have been rescinded and 3 employees have deployed. RCMP is currently doing its guaranteed reasonable job offer analysis in hopes of reducing the affected statuses even further. Thereafter, we will be going into the VDP process and likely SHRLO if needed. They're expected to move into the next steps by the end of May or beginning of January. So RCMP, initially, we were meeting with them on a monthly basis. That was not good enough. We were getting too many questions from members, so we've now moved the meetings to a bi-weekly basis. And then the final department we don't have any news from yet, which is the CHRC, Canada Human Rights Commission. No WFA exercise, no notice. However, on March 26th, there was an announcement by the Director General and CFO indicating that a need to reduce the workforce may arise, and as such, WFA is not off the table for the department. So the reason we flagged that one is to let you know that while we have 8 active departments right now, we do represent 17, and WFA can still start in some of these other departments. We do expect that in some cases it will. I know that's a lot of numbers. To give you an overview, total affected USJE members since June 2025 currently sits at approximately 1,057. So we know that many of those will be resolved without job loss, but it's still an incredibly stressful for all those that are affected. So we're digitally monitoring the situation for each individual case. In addition to meeting with the departments on the various WFA exercises, I, along with USJE's labor relations officers, are part of PSAC's component-wide WFA working group that is chaired and run by Aaron and Darren, who are on this call. They are our subject matter experts and who we go to. Through that group, components under their will share sort of progress on WFA exercises, will raise issues that we're seeing with respective departments. We meet regularly to discuss any developments that PSAC can share from its meetings with the Treasury Board and to discuss what each component is seeing or hearing around budget cuts in general, WFA exercises specifically for the departments. So we rely heavily on what comes to us from the regional vice presidents and from the members to be able to share that with the broader PSAC community. We also have the issue of early retirement incentive. I think we all know that the government has said that this is a separate process. While they may see it that way, it nonetheless impacts WFA and we would argue reduction target numbers. Many of our departments have indicated that they are currently in the process of beginning to review and consider ERI applications. We're advised that while all are applying the criteria that was established by the government, special and express consideration is being given to those who are affected and who have expressed an interest in ERI. That's my update for where we are at with the different departments. I can't really speak in this specific forum about specific cases. Happy to answer any more general or broader questions that you may have. But members are also reminded that their local and or their regional vice presidents is their first contact with the union for any individual questions that they may have with WFA.
Thank you, Melanie. We'll ask David to come back on. Just waiting for President Neufeld. In the meantime, I don't know, David did mention that USJE released its correctional program officer report in both official language. It is available on our website, so feel free to go download the report. And also, thank you to all of our Public Safety Award recipients. We've updated our USJE About Us card, and these are our members who were the recipients of the Public Safety Award. And that is also available on our website. So while the tech are working on their technical difficulties, Mel, if you can come back on, because I do have a question for you, and we should start with this question really. What is SIRLO? You've used that word or that acronym, SIRLO. What is that? And secondly, what is the Voluntary Departure Program? What does that mean?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Sorry, Seb, was that working?
Mel, you can say it. We can hear you now, Melanie.
Okay, Mel, we're back.
The joys of technology. Okay, I was just saying to Sebastian, I'm going to invite Aaron or Darren to jump in when it comes to defining. Of course, we can answer those as well, but we have the subject matter experts. It would be great to hear from them. I don't know, Seb, if you want to repeat the question.
Of course, I can repeat the question for you. So what is SIRLO? What is SIRLO? What does that mean? And what is Voluntary Departure Program? What does that mean?
Hello, bonsoir. My name's Erin, as David said. And I appreciate the way you pronounce my last name with a French accent, David. My ancestors from long, long ago would be proud. Okay, so your question is about the Voluntary Departure Program and SURLO. So the Voluntary Departure Program, also known as VDP, is a key part of the workforce adjustment process. And PSAC members negotiated this program in the workforce adjustment appendix of your collective agreement in order to promote voluntary departures when there are job cuts. So the programs, as Melanie just talked about, are quite effective in reducing involuntary departures. So when she was going through the various departments, she talked about, the fact that voluntary departure programs had reduced the number of SURLO processes that would need to take place. Now, what is a SURLO process? So a SURLO process is, it stands for the selection of employees for retention or layoff, SURLO. What this is it's a process that for the employer to determine who is retained and who is laid off when there are more employees at the same group and level in a work unit than there are positions to hold. So there was an example that Melanie gave where there were 7 positions. I think it maybe was with, now I'm forgetting which one. I think it was maybe with, anyways, you will remind me, Melanie, but there were 7 positions across the prairies and they were retaining 5 of those folks. So that's where a SURLO process comes in, because the employer has 7 people in the same position essentially, and there are only 5 jobs. Now, unfortunately, this is a process that resides outside of the collective agreement because it is governed by the Public Service Employment Act and its regulations. So due to the legislation, the government has refused to negotiate this process with us, or this part of the workforce adjustment process with us, which unfortunately means that management has full discretion and control over how this process unfolds. And it is for that reason that we have been fighting for years to get this process into the collective agreement and to negotiate a process that is fair and transparent for our members. Because right now in the SURLO process, managers determine the essential qualifications for the job, asset qualifications, and the current and future needs of the organization in relation to the position. And then managers have full discretion to decide the assessment methods. They assess employees in this process, and then they determine through that who is retained. So that's what SURLO stands for. And if you go looking for it in your collective agreement, you won't find it there. Like I said, it's outside of the workforce adjustment appendix. But if you Google it, you will find information about it on the government's website, as well as on the PSAC website, which has a whole bunch of resources on our WFA page, including FAQs that speak to SURLO. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Erin. I think we may have another question here until David can come back to us. David, yes, if you want to come back to your presentation, the floor is yours.
Okay, so as you can see, USJE has been very busy over the past several months as we have worked to get as much information as possible from the departments and agencies. We've also sought to equip USJE representatives at every level, including regional vice presidents, with the information and tools to fight these cuts and best represent our members. There's also been some strong media interest over the last little while on cuts being made within the public safety realm. So consequently, we've leveraged several opportunities to highlight the invaluable role of USJE's members in keeping Canadians safe. This includes briefing to the Minister's office when possible, briefings to the Commissioner of the Correctional Service of Canada, and comments to the media. We have spoken out regarding specifically the affected notices and cuts to USJE members supporting legal teams within the Ministry of Justice, significant cuts to positions performed by USJE members at the Government Operations Center in Public Safety, We've also had plans to reduce the number, also in relation to plans to reduce the number of correctional program officers and correctional educators, plans to entirely eliminate the community employment coordinator position within the correctional service, and impacts of WFA cuts to other non-USJE positions on USJE's members' workloads moving forward, such as librarians within CSC. And on a positive note, I must take a moment to recognize that after years and years of advocacy by USJE, the Correctional Service of Canada moved to strengthen the resources in the area of sentence management. En conclusion, je peux dire avec une confiance absolue que moi-même et chacun des vice-présidents régionaux de SESJ présents ici ce soir sommes absolument déterminés à défendre chaque emploi de SESJ et à protéger le rôle des membres de SESJ dans les 17 ministères et organismes où ils et elles travaillent, étant donné que leur contribution à la sécurité des Canadiens est inestimable. I look forward again to having your questions come forward and your comments, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sébastien at this moment.
Merci beaucoup, David. Alors, comme vous voyez, il peut y avoir des problèmes techniques avec des événements virtuels. Alors, pour cette raison, pour recevoir vos questions, s'il vous plaît, les écrire dans la section questions et réponses. C'est impossible pour nous de vous donner accès à la caméra puis au micro parce qu'il peut y avoir des problèmes techniques, puis on va perdre un peu de temps. Alors, s'il vous plaît, nous envoyez vos questions par écrit. That being said, we do have a few questions lined up. Thank you for sending your questions. And if for some reason we run out of time and you put in a question, we'll be sure to follow through afterwards. So the next question, unfortunately, Darren, it's going to be for you. And it's a sad one. As a member who's affected, what should we be doing to help ourselves? We've been told to start looking for another position as soon as possible, as available positions are very limited. I am in a position that has been deemed no longer across Canada nationally. Darren, what would you say to this member?
Thanks, Seb. I think I answered a version of this question on the USJE podcast, The Safety Net, when we talked about that type of situation. So if you're a member and you have an affected letter, one of the best things you can do is take that pause and look to look to your support network first. So let people prioritizing one's mental health and well-being is sort of number one. But number two, it's connecting with all the resources that we have. And on the PSCC WFA landing page, there is specifically a part where it's called the affected checklist. So it's a member checklist of what to do if you receive an affected notice. So getting as much information as you can about what managers are saying. If you get your letter, read your letter, ask your union representative if you need any clarification with this number. I'll flag that. We know that some affected letters, not all affected letters are being created equal. And we know that some of them have information that can be confusing. So if you have a letter that may look like that, it's certainly worth, exactly. Thanks for bringing that up. That's exactly what I'm pointing to is the link in there. So reach out for your union to ensure that the information in your letter is accurate and clear. And again, if you get that affected letter, you have some time because it doesn't start a clock on the next type of decisions. If you perhaps you're somebody who's looking to exit the public service, retire, look to another career. Maybe there's a voluntary departure program, but if you just have a letter, take a good look at what it says. It may say there's a voluntary departure program. It may just say you're affected. You may just sort of be in that stressful situation of having a letter for an extended period of time. But maybe there's a voluntary departure program. If there is and it closes, maybe there's a SURLO process selection of employees for layoff or retention. And down the road, if you maybe go through that process and are not retained, perhaps then your status changes from affected to you become an opting employee. That's the situation where a clock can start, where you have a decision-making period of 120 days. We can get into the details of that, but the key things is get good information, reach out to your union representative, maintain that communication with your supervisor and manager to ensure that you can be contacted easily. Put your updating your CV and is also could be valuable if other if jobs come up, because remember what was interesting and something that Melanie said is the RCMP is doing a guarantee of a reasonable job offer analysis right now. So the management should be doing these analyses both within the department and side of it, and they may come to you with a job. So that is something that could happen during the once you have that letter in hand too. So stay connected with supports, stay connected with your union, stay connected with the resources, the WFA landing page that Seb showed, and sign up for all the USJE communications, because they will have that support too. But those are some of the most important things you can do if you have that affected letter.
Thank you very much, Darren. And as you can understand, the WFA process, it's a big process. It's quite extensive. If you want to just sit back and listen to it, like Darren said, we've recorded 2 bilingual podcast episodes on the WFA that's available on our website or wherever you listen to your podcast. So those resources are available if you just want to listen to the resource that's available. Aaron, next question is for you, my friend. So, why is it up to managers who they retain?
Great question. And it picks up on what I was talking about in relation to the SIRLO process. So the selection of employees for retention and layoff process. So the long story short is because the government has created legislation that governs this part of the layoff process. And this part meaning the process by which a manager determines who is retained and who is laid off if there are more employees than there are jobs available. So we, as I said, have been fighting this for years because we know that the process is not fair and not transparent. It is a process that is unlike any other layoff process in across the country for unionized employees. If you pick up a collective agreement for any other worker in this country, chances are you're going to find a layoff section in the collective agreement, a layoff article, and what you'll find is a process of how it's determined who is laid off. And most often that process relies on seniority. And the reason for that is because seniority is objective. It is a number on a page. It is not whether or not your manager likes you. It's not whether or not you golf together on the weekends. It's not whether or not you're a man or a woman, or non-binary or trans. It's just a number on a page. So it's not, you're not able to manipulate that figure. And that's why unions for many, many years have negotiated seniority in the layoff process. We also negotiated seniority in lots of other places, like wages, for example. Your wage is determined on a grid based on your seniority. Also, when it comes to vacation, based on seniority, you get a certain number of days or weeks based on your years of service. So this is not a new concept. And the reason why union members negotiate this and fight for it is because it is objective and it takes the power out of management's hands. Unfortunately, we have a system in place right now that has been legislated, like I said, by the government, that we are fighting. We are fighting it at the bargaining table. We're also preparing a legal challenge because at the bargaining table over previous rounds, we have been unable to get the government to budge on this. So for now, we have this process in place. We assist members in going through the process, even though it's not in the collective agreement. And if there is a problem, if you face problems in the process, like you believe there's been an abuse of authority, if you believe there has been discrimination, you can file a staffing complaint. It's not a grievance because Again, the process sits outside of the collective agreement, but you do have some recourse if you do feel that you've been mistreated in the process.
Thank you, Aaron. David, the next question is for you. Let me get it for you here. Let's see. Okay, hopefully, let's see. What cuts are we expecting with program officers, and should we expect cuts with parole officers, as resources at present are stretched beyond capacity and only getting worse? David?
Yeah, so on January the 26th, that was a few days before the affected notices came out from the Correctional Service of Canada. There was some documentation that CSC had shared with us. They also put it on their infonet, detailing what the cuts could look like over waves 1, 2, and 3. And wave 1 was pretty clear in terms of what they were cutting. There were very specific positions that were named. And then when it came to wave 2, it was talking about correctional programs, the correctional program model, and reviewing that. So this is one of the hugest problems that we've had with this entire process, is that the Correctional Service of Canada was not prepared to walk through these steps in a very clear, methodical manner and have everything laid out in terms of what the cuts were going to look like. And it really came down to dollar amounts. We know that the $132.2 million is what they need to find in operational savings between now and 2029. And so they're trying to match numbers with the numbers that they have every April 1st of the subsequent year. And that's why with the program officers as well, there was no clear identification given. The interesting thing here is that I do believe that there is a constant review going on. There are numbers that they are looking at. And again, this is the dangerous thing. When they're looking at numbers, and depending on who they're consulting with on the front line, whether it's managers or whatever, I don't know what information is actually out there in terms of from site to site or so on. But from a union perspective, we are not able to comment nor provide information on what that's going to look like because there's no actual determination that has been made. And this, I'll use the example of the teachers. When they affected 136 teachers to eliminate 19 positions, that put 136 people on notice that there were reductions coming in that area. We have been very clear when it relates to programs and wave 2 that they need to do this in a more fairer way and making sure that they need to be more precise. And this goes to the definition of work unit and so on. So when I hear that people are concerned about what's happening in programs, I understand the concern. And the reality is that $132.2 million has to be found in some way. And it's not just obviously with USJE members, it's other bargaining units as well. And so when we talk about wave 3, it also talks about correctional interventions. And that's where I think the question is coming around parole officers in particular. What I can confirm for you is that in conversations that we have with CSC, we've made it very clear that we're extremely lean. We're extremely lean, workloads are too high, and making these cuts will make it extremely difficult for our members to do their job in a good way. And I'll say at our public safety awards, when Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasandagri were there and others, and including the Commissioner of Corrections, new Commissioner Talal Dakobab was there. And we made a public plea to stop the cuts, to take a look at what you're doing, because it's going to have an impact. And I wish I could provide you more information, but when it comes to the cuts, they will only be able to be announced through the employer. That's how we will receive that information. And again, I don't know if Aaron or Darren or Melanie want to comment, but when it comes to affected notices, it's basically 48 hours minimum notice. And that's how quickly we will become aware of what that looks like. So I don't know if Aaron or Darren want to make a comment on what I've said.
It looks like you captured it all, David. Now, Darren, the next question for you, follow up from the member who is affected. And of course, we can't talk about individual cases, but if you are affected, ultimately, should they be looking for a different job?
The best way to the best answer there is that if that's what you're, because some folks may say, hey, I'm going to take it's a very personal answer is what I'm saying. So some folks may take that beat, say, hey, I'm going to sort of assess the scene, kind of wait to see what comes to me. Depends where you're at in the cycle of your career too, if you've just started versus if you're nearing retirement. So your options will look different and possibilities may look different as well. So it is a very individual question. If you're thinking of, if you're somebody who's thinking that they want to stay employed in the federal public service, then putting yourself up there, applying sort of, we've heard examples of folks securing their own reasonable job offer. They're reaching out to hiring managers. They're leaning on their network. They're brushing, they're updating that resume. They're engaging in that way. And so then they get a job and they're like, okay, I'm leaving, I'm moving departments. So they get sort of, I guess their letter would be, they are no longer part of one department and they're a part of another one. Also being a vocal advocate with the HR advisors and your managers and your supervisor in your department on pushing them to seek out for you guarantees of reasonable job offers to lean on all the language of the appendix to sort of do that. So it's sort of, again, very personal, sort of depends where you're at. If you're somebody who's seeking to stay and are ready to sort of be that vocal advocate, then that's certainly something we've heard that folks do. And there is a paragraph about that in that member checklist too, if you see of an affected notice. So the more you know about the resources, the better too, because that'll bolster your understanding of all the processes, and you may even know more than the managers in that situation. So that could advantage you. I would bet you're going to know more than the managers if you read all our resources.
Thank you, Darren. I'll have another question for you, Darren, and then I'll go to Melanie. So, Darren, can a substantive be let go over a term?
So in that case, a couple things. The workforce adjustment appendix applies exclusively to indeterminate employees. That's number one when this piece comes out. Now there is an article in the collective agreement that speaks to attrition, the job security article 23, where we see that before sort of layoffs, attrition has to happen in other ways. In practice, a substantive employee, an indeterminate employee who has an effective letter, the process for them to be involuntarily separated from their job, a full layup, can be a very long process. Terms, there's different rules that govern the employment, their employment, the terms and conditions of employment. So in practice, an indeterminate employee should not be let go before over a term employee, but we do see instances where people are getting letters, affected letters, and we see the department hiring terms. So it is something. If you feel that something like that has happened in your department, raise it to your union, make everybody aware, because this situation, the WFA applies to the indeterminate employee, so it's not as if WFA applies to both and terms are being treated differently than indeterminate. There are two separate processes for them, and monitoring that situation, particularly if it's in your work unit or your section, or that is very important. And your unions and your USJE's departmental joint WFA committee can raise that piece as concern. Also, if you're a term, there are resources on the WFA landing page that speak to we've assembled all the resources related to term employment in an effort to help, because we know that the impact on term employees has been significant as well through this process. So hopefully that adds a touch of clarity there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Darren. Melanie, the next question is for you. Some USJE members work in healthcare and they've been told nothing. What can you comment or say about that?
So I mean, on the aggregate, we don't have numbers for healthcare. I think it was noted by David under the collective agreement. We're only told 48 hours, or PSCC is only told 48 hours before any lists are launched. So we're not aware of any specifics. I will say, as I had noted, that we are meeting with sector heads, specifically within corrections, to understand their plans in each of their departments with these reductions. We did meet with health services. What was explained to us with health services is that they're looking, there's a WFA exercise that's happening, but simultaneously and even prior to WFA, they're looking at transforming the way they do business. What they have said is that the plan is not to cut, but to transform. Obviously, we know that within corrections, the needs of tomorrow are increasing, especially they have an aging population, as you all know. So they haven't shared numbers. They have sort of, at the same time, to keep it positive, their outlook appears to be positive because in the transformation, while there will be eliminations, they've been clear about that. There's also going to be new opportunity with the way they're transforming their business. So we're hoping that the impact in terms of actual job loss will hopefully be minimal, if not non-existent. Again, this is all prefaced under conversations and meetings we would have had prior to the new commissioner. So each sector head has been very clear that they had their plans in place. We fully expected this to have been launched in wave 2, mainly because it wasn't launched in wave 1, so we knew it was coming. But it's under review with the new commissioner, so it could very well be that the plan in its entirety changes. It's not, the transformation itself is being communicated. So if nothing is being told to you, you may want to speak to your managers or supervisors and ask that what the plan is there. I'm not surprised if middle management does not have any information on WFA. Again, they're holding that close right now, but they should have some kind of knowledge of what the plans are for the future and how the department is looking to transform.
Thank you, Melanie. The next question is for Aaron. Aaron, this is the question that was sent to us. I'm wondering if the WFA position cuts are adding a layer of complexity to collective agreement negotiations. I'm thinking about the PSCC negotiations for the PA group that aren't going well. If the employer has wanted to reduce, I can't imagine fair negotiating for things like salary increases will be done well. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I mean, the context in which we're bargaining always impacts negotiations, whatever is happening politically, economically, it all plays a role at the bargaining table. So it's no different this round than in previous rounds, and every round comes with its own challenges and its own obstacles to overcome. So on the one hand, it is, yes, a challenging time to be bargaining in the context of job cuts, job losses, downsizing. But on the other hand, it provides people are living this experience right now, right? You and your coworkers are living this experience, and nothing is more motivating in terms of joining in the mobilization and organizing to achieve a good collective agreement than using your lived experiences. And so we found during DRAP, for example, we achieved some of our most significant improvements in the round of collective bargaining that was happening during DRAP. And DRAP, sorry to use another acronym, is the Deficit Reduction Action Plan, which was brought in under Stephen Harper, which again amounted to job cuts and budget reductions. So it's not a fait accompli that the collective agreement negotiated in this round will be bad or not as good as it should be because of the context that we're bargaining in. There are always opportunities to come together in solidarity and push for a better agreement. And the past indicates that that is actually more likely the case than it is not. So I hope that that provides some encouragement during this period of bargaining.
Thank you, Aaron. The next question will go to David, and after we'll go to Mel. David, given that programs are already operating with staffing shortages and inmates are waiting beyond their conditional release eligibility dates to begin programming, is the union requesting what CSC is planned to manage or limit staff reductions in program areas while preserving rehabilitation services and time progression for members?
So that's a good question because, again, being identified as wave 2 changes to the correctional program model. What does that mean for our members? Where in many parts of the country, they are already overworked. And as has been mentioned, inmates or offenders are not getting timely programs. So when we released our correctional program officer report back on March 24th on Parliament Hill with Dr. Rose Retcherdelli, we made it clear to this government publicly that they need to take a look, first of all, at what's going on in programs, period, and to make sure that they're addressing the concerns that were identified through the correctional program officers in that report. We also took the opportunity just prior to that release on Commissioner Dakelbab's first day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to go through the report and the recommendations. And we pleaded with him that they need to make sure they take this full report into consideration and all its recommendations before making these changes. Now, again, I'll go back to the point I had made earlier, is that this department has to come up with $132.2 million. And they're going to find it in one means or another. But having said that, when we meet with CSC and they're taking a look at correctional programs across the country, they're saying in some areas, there's more program officers than others. And we saw that happen, I believe it was last year, where some resources were moved from one region to another to accommodate or to meet the needs specifically of Ontario. So I don't know where the question is specifically coming from, but I'm not surprised to hear that we're still having those issues in terms of getting inmates and offenders the program that they need at the most timely manner. So what I will say is we are going to continue to push CSC on this and encourage them not to make those cuts. The other thing that we've also understood is that where there are vacancies currently across the country, that might be the means in which that they make those decisions in terms of eliminating vacancies. The other thing is around ERI as well. This department, as well the other departments we represent, have been trying to use ERI to limit the amount of WFA or affected notices that are going out. And as far as I know around ERI, I think this is something that CSC is looking at very closely to help try to achieve the reductions overall that they're trying to get under the $132.2 million.
Thank you, David. Mélanie, la prochaine question est pour toi. Est-ce que vous avez une idée de quand surviendra la troisième vague de coupure? Ah, tu t'as unmuté puis tu t'as muté après.
Voilà, OK. Pour le service correctionnel, en principe, qu'est-ce qui avait été communiqué? C'est que la troisième vague serait en 2027 et 2028 pour l'année fiscale. Ce qu'on a vu, évidemment, on n'est même pas encore abordé la deuxième vague. Donc, on n'a pas d'information si c'est encore le même horaire 2027-2028. Je peux vous dire, avec le nouveau commissaire, c'est sûr que nous, on pousse de notre côté pour que le service correctionnel réévalue vraiment le besoin d'avoir une troisième vague. Est-ce que c'est possible de faire ça plus vite? Est-ce que c'est possible de faire le tout dans 2 vagues? Ça serait l'idéal, c'est ce que le syndicat pousse de notre côté. La raison principale, dans le fond, on voit avec nos membres, il y a l'option de faire des échanges de postes. Et le plus longtemps qu'on attend pour faire ces exercices, le moins d'échanges de postes d'options qu'il y aura possible dans la fonction publique. Il y a aussi, qu'est-ce que David avait référé comme le ERI, c'est qui est l'incitation à la retraite anticipée. C'est un programme qui sera fini d'ici la fin de l'année. Donc, si on attend une troisième vague, il y a des opportunités qui vont manquer pour ceux qui sont, puis notre côté, c'est qu'ils vont être préjudiciés par cet exercice. On ne sait pas encore. En principe, 2027-2028, on espère que ça va changer avec le nouveau commissaire.
Merci beaucoup, Mélanie. So there's no more questions in the Q&A. I will give you just a few minutes to type in your questions. In the meantime, I'm going to take the opportunity, because this is a CSC-focused town hall. We did share this information with all of our members. We had their personal email addresses. So please just make sure that your PSPC pension portal does have your beneficiary information. Apparently there was a glitch in their system, and thank you to the USJE member who contacted their RVP to bring this to our attention so we could flag it to all of our members. So make sure that your beneficiary information is accurate in your portal, please, because that could have major impacts. Let's see if we received other questions. And if you did see, I did receive another question that's not pertaining to the topic here. So we'll ensure to follow up in writing, because we don't want members to ask a question and not get their answer. Andrew, let's see. I'm with CHRC. But in general, would you say that overall we can all breathe a sigh of relief if notices by end of 2028? What would you say to that, Melanie? Do you take a sigh of relief until 2028? And you're on mute.
My initial reaction is I sure hope so. We don't know. It's a 3-year plan right now. CHRC has been vague, as you know. You would have seen the same messaging that we did because it was sent out to all employees. We do expect departments to be, if there is a need for cuts, that it would be sooner than later. But to be very, very frank, I don't know at this point if 2028 is too far down the road.
Okay, thank you. And Andrew, thank you. My apologies, I missed your question. Thank you for bringing me in line. And I'm just going to read the question out there and we'll see who will volunteer to answer. So again, my apologies and thank you, Andrew. Why are USJE and PSCC counseling members to look for new jobs based on rumors? People are being told to look for other jobs before they're affected. Specifically, why are the unions telling correctional program officers in Maxes that they are being eliminated when there has been no confirmation that this is actually happening? This all seems to stem from one email from the outgoing commissioner that said they will focus on behavior interventions. Who would like to take that question? It's kind of WFA.
That's
and
me.
David, of course, David, coming from CSC. David, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, so again, this is part of the problem with CSC in terms of identifying where the cuts are going to be made. Because they're looking at the correctional program model, I know there have been discussions out there about, well, what does that mean? What are they going to change? Where are they going to change it? So I think that there's been some discussions at the local level, the regional level, about where they're going to find that. And all I can say is right now with the new commissioner who has taken a review of everything that's going on, it's not clear where they're going to find those cuts. So what I hear you saying here in this question is that people are saying that we should be looking for other jobs before knowing that we're affected. My caution to you is we don't know what this commissioner is going to do at this point. I know that he continues to take a look at very specific cuts that they've already made. And so with the big amount of program officers that we have across the country and not knowing what they are looking at doing, I just don't want to hazard a guess on putting information out there that simply could be incorrect. So what I would suggest is that you continue to remain connected to your local president, also your regional vice president. And, again, I would just say, hold on, let's see what CSC is going to come back with. I think it's completely unfair. It was just like the ERI. Even myself as your national president, I got an ERI letter in December 15th last year. And like you, I'm looking at it, oh, isn't this great? You're sending me a letter with no real plan. Right. And it's not even if I would have applied, if I had wanted to, it doesn't mean I'd be approved. I would look at this almost the same way. We just don't know. And I certainly don't want anyone to be jumping from jobs when we just simply don't know what is going to happen.
Perfect. Thank you, David. The next question is for Darren. Please explain alternation as a tool the employer is resistant to implementing. What is the recourse?
So I guess I'll start with a couple pieces. the way the question was phrased, I'm going to assume there's some knowledge about the alternation, but I'll give a quick recap. So alternation is a tool that's been it's a part of the collective agreement that all departments must set up and establish. Ostensibly, it is a job swapping mechanism where folks with an affected letter who are in their opting that 120-day period, or they've chosen option A and they have the surplus priority period, they have that period to swap jobs with somebody who doesn't have an affected letter, so somebody who's not affected. There's some rules around who is eligible, same group and level, or within 6%. You have to meet the same things like the qualifications of the position, including language requirement, and of course there's some benefits, some entitlements for the non-affected person who is exiting the public service. The non-affected employee, they can select from some options. But what the question I think is driving at is what I can call a sort of alternation governance, sort of how managers are assessing once two people have found themselves on a platform and match. So first, I'll speak a little bit to the platforms. Treasury Board has a platform on the TAPS, what's called the Treasury Board Application Portal. They have an alternation platform. PSAC has an alternation platform for Treasury Board members, as well as Park, CFIA, and CRA members. And I'm not sure if the departments within which USJE members I'm not sure if each of those, which of those departments may have their own, but we are aware that some departments have their own platforms. So in an effort to maximize alternation opportunities, put yourself out on all the platforms. So finally, I'll get to this sort of the recourse piece. The recourse piece is really important, and we have a section in the Treasury Board WFA FAQs on alternation. And specifically in those FAQs, we have a rights and protections section that speaks to what are the reasons that an employer can refuse an alternation? Are matches found? Some managers are making some decisions. We've heard a lot of wild stories. There's a lot of grievances on this topic. So managers can only refuse if they can demonstrate that a match will not retain the skills required to meet the operational needs, and that any sort of retraining or orientation, sort of onboarding, cannot address that perceived skills gap. And that language is from the collective agreement, and we work to hold the employer as accountable as possible to that language. And we know that there's a growing list of invalid reasons that managers refuse alternations. And some examples of those are if the department says, no, we don't want to participate, they have to participate. The department says, oh, well, we have future reorganization plans and that doesn't fit. Again, not a reason to refuse. That the language requirements of the job will change in the future. Again, not a reason to refuse. That the person's not a perfect match. Again, not a reason to refuse. I'm trying to think of another one, it's going to take too long to process, untimely administration. Again, not a reason to refuse. And remember, during that Harper era, there was arbitrations that were won by the union to sort of codify some of these things. If you've given your retirement date, you said, I'm going to retire and here's my date, a manager can refuse in that instance an alternation. So that's one example, another example of a reason why they can. But taking all that together, lean on the FAQs, because they say, what do you do if you suspect an unfair denial or delays? Keep all those written records, contact your union, escalate, because if you feel like you're facing an unfair denial or an unfair delay, that's where the USJE representatives can step in and advocate and amplify and escalate. So please avail yourselves of the FAQs on this one. So there's lots of good stuff there. Thanks.
Thank you, Darren. Yes, thank you very much. We've received a lot of questions this evening. Thank you for all the engagement. David, I'll give you the final words.
Merci encore pour votre participation active ce soir. Restez assurés que votre syndicat est là pour vous. I want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. Rest assured that your union is here for you. Stay informed and join your union in advocating on behalf of federal public safety personnel who keep Canadians safe. I hope you have a good evening and bonne soirée.